to the Fintech South Mainstage, Elatia Abate.
Woo! Good afternoon. Good afternoon. There we go. I am so excited to be here with you today. And as I was thinking about what it was that we could come here and talk about, my initial thought was to take you back even 2 years or even a year ago, the way that I would get up on stage. Right? I would jump up here, I would get you all whipped up into the frenzy of AI and how it's going to change the world and what it's going to impact and all of the abundance that it's going to bring. And this is true. However, this is not that moment. Because the size, scale, scope, and speed of change that has unfolded over the last 12 months has been so enormous that we're not going to be able to meet the velocity of change at that change. And all I would be doing was exacerbating this thing called future shock, which is what happens to us when we experience too much change in too short of a period of time. Who here has felt uncertain at all over the last 12 months? Yeah, even scared? Anyone? Nervous? Yeah, right? And so the thing to do as the speed of change continues to grow is not to try and meet it there, but counterintuitively actually roll back, slow down, and remember what it means to be a human. So I'm going to invite you all to do that right now. So you can just sit up in your seats. Just, you have a body, so you can touch your arms. Yeah, just make sure your legs touch arms or legs. Look to your left and right. Look a fellow human being in the eye and say hello. Yeah. And then, yay, you're all making friends. This is wonderful. And then let's breathe in and out together one time, this enormous, wonderful, gorgeous oxygen that gives us life. So let's breathe in and breathe out. Great. So now that we're in touch with our humanity again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some context that can bring us all to the same level in the conversation here today. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share 3 strategies that are going to help you and your organizations thrive as the age of AI continues to unfold. How does that sound? Yes, I hope it sounds good, because that's what we're doing. Okay, so I am Elatia Abate. I am a futurist, and I have spent the better part of the last decade way out here at the edge of disruption, making sense of the dynamics that are changing our world and translating those into tools and strategies and frameworks that companies like Fortune 500s and growth stage startups and universities and government officials can use to answer what I fundamentally think is the central question of the future of work and strategy, which is how might we empower our success in the face of great uncertainty and disruption. And although I don't have time today to give you 10 years of research, what I am going to do is I'm going to give you the cliff notes of the opera, right? Highlights. Change is accelerating. And that velocity of change has moved from centuries to seasons to seconds. Telephone took 900 months to meet 100 million users. ChatGPT, of course, only 2. And make no mistake, AI is altering absolutely everything. It's what economists call a general purpose technology. And so it's not just one business process or one subsegment of the economy. It is fundamentally opening new markets, closing others, and shifting some of the underlying structure that we have counted on in society as a whole. And the impact of that, there is so much of it going on, but if you remember no other concept from our conversation here today, it is what I am calling the stackable factory, the industrial revolution that we are moving in and through right now. So think about a factory that's inside of a skyscraper. And what is the definition of that stackable factory? An emerging model of work in which machine intelligence is guided by human ingenuity. It breaks knowledge work into modular assembly line style tasks that can be stacked, scaled, and reordered, reshaping workflows, roles, and industries in real time. So what does this mean? Right? Fundamentally, if you think about it, the assembly line, when it came online, human beings use tools to build stuff. Fast forward with robotics, and today assembly lines are basically human beings guiding robots to build that same stuff. What's happening in the knowledge economy right now is that up until now, human beings have used SaaS and other software tools to do our knowledge work. Now, it's going to be machine intelligence guided by human ingenuity to basically do that same thing. And this is happening inside of your own organizations and every single client organization that you have. And so if you can understand this and begin to pull the thread of how it's going to impact your industry, fintech, then competitive advantage starts to open up. You get to really shape what the future of work is going to look like, and you get to reimagine an entire industry. And this is already happening. We're seeing it at Amazon. Coders are starting to see that their jobs are resembling warehouse work. The bottom rung of the career ladder is shifting. And that can feel kind of scary, right? Coming in, all of this disruption and all of this change. But if you think about it, it's sort of a process. As we move from companies, we'll call it analog-ish, right? So companies that have used traditional technologies, to those, I think a lot of the enterprise organizations in this room are using analog-ish plus AI. And then those like Sean Neville, who's going to be speaking after this, AI first, not just AI in process, in product, but also in coworkers. And what does this do to the shift in our work and working? So this is the most important concept. But in all of this change, there is no future of work fairy. There is no cavalry coming who's going to swing open the doors that says, everybody, Ron and Larry and all of you guys, this is what the future is going to look like. And as a futurist, I have to take a little bit of responsibility. That can feel kind of scary, right? In the face of all of this disruption. Anyone feel a little nervous about it? But in the face of all of this disruption, what I have come to know and understand is that we have this fundamental choice, which is totally empowering, which is we can either be captives to our circumstances, asking why is this happening to us, or we can step into the captain's seat and say, given that we're here, what do we want to create? Because although there is no cavalry coming, guess what? We are it. We are the ones who are creating, in fact, we are co-creating this future together. And rather than a doorway of doom and gloom, we are actually moving through a window of empowerment in which we can shape a world that is more equitable, more just, and more abundant for everybody if we collaborate together in new and exciting ways. And if we understand that the technology that we're using to build this is not just a tool, but also a collaborator. So what do we do in the face of all of this? How do we build a future from now into that future that's empowering? It's three things, right? It's getting clear about who we are, where we're going, and why we think it's important. It's expanding the options that are available to us, and it is centering humans and humanity. So first, get clear, right? 10 years ago, I left the corporate world. I used to run global recruiting for Anheuser-Busch InBev and then for Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal. And I initially left to solve for the problem that most people are unhappy at work. 75 to 85% of the planet, depending on what year the stats came out. And while there are many reasons for this, fundamentally it is a flaw in strategy. And what do I mean by that? So when we go to school, we're getting ready to get our first job. We graduate and we ask ourselves the question, what can I logically do with what I've already done, what I already know? You start your first job. You amass a few years of skills and experience, and it's time to grow again, and what do? You ask that same question. Now, this is a strategy that works if you're lucky enough to pick a job early on in your career that's particularly aligned with who you become, or if you landed in a place that you've always wanted to do. But if you've evolved over time, or if your industry has shifted, all that strategy does is stack challenges on top of challenges on top of challenges, or bad ideas and bad options on top of bad options. So what you really want to do if you want to find fulfillment in career is you take a few steps back and take a moonshot approach and you ask three powerful questions. What do I want to create? What kind of impact do I want to have? And how do I want to use my life? And then you begin to align your skills, resources, and talent behind creating that. Now, I share this with you today both because it's useful, for thinking about your own selves individually, but it turns out that this is an excellent strategy for growing your business as well. 2.5 years ago, I was in Texas to give a keynote speech. I sat down at the bar at the hotel to grab some dinner, and next to me sits down a gentleman who's a CEO of a company that sits at the intersection of finance, energy, and AI. And he's telling me they're private equity backed, and they're getting ready to exit, and they're hitting this milestone and that milestone, and I'm just like, sounds like you're, it's a baller, like this is amazing, but you don't look very happy. And he said, yeah, I get it, we're getting the numbers, but I've sort of lost my mojo along the way. And I said, look, take this for the free bar advice that it is, but ask yourself these 3 questions on behalf of yourself and on behalf of your business, and then just see what happens. Now, I didn't think anything of it. I left the dinner, 2 days passed, I get a phone call, Elatia, I've been awake for 2 days. I asked these questions on behalf of myself. I asked them on behalf of my business. I took them to my board. I took them to my investors and to my executive team. We are not going to go to exit. What we're going to do is we're going to move toward global expansion. This was 2.5 years ago, and in less than 2.5 years, we've more than doubled the size of his business, and now they are poised for a 9-figure global expansion. 3 questions, a ton of impact. So get clear about who you are, what you're going, where you're going, and why you think that's important. Secondly, expanding your strategic options. Earlier this year in March, the CEO of a company that sits at the intersection of AI and consumer experience wanted to help her executive team get ready for thriving in a world where the pace of change in technology is moving as fast as the one that we're living in right now. And so we organized the executive offsite for her team, and what we anchored it in was what I call the strategic kaleidoscope. A tool to help us expand options in the face of everything that's moving. And to do this, we anchored it into one of the major paradigm shifts that's happening now in the futures of work and strategy, which is the shift from a world that was linear to a world that's exponential to a world that is now quantum or instantaneous in its shifts. And if you want to think about this through the lens of industrial revolutions, the first and second cotton gin, assembly line, they were fast for the time, but they were relatively slow compared to what's happening now. The third industrial revolution was digital. The fourth, Internet of Things, AI, quantum computing. And as we said earlier, the speed of change has moved from centuries to seasons to seconds. So the strategies that worked back in the time when things were moving at the pace of centuries aren't going to work the same way today. And so the dynamics of change are different, from incremental to exponential to emergent or instantaneous. And so there's a central question that drives strategy at each of these kinds of junctures that can help expand your options for what you're creating and make your strategic planning and thinking more robust. And the first question is rooted in logic. The second one is rooted in creation. And the third one is rooted in presence and paying attention. And you'll recognize this question: what can we logically do with what we've already done, what we already know? First question. Second question, given that we're here, what is it that we want to create? And then third question, right now in this very moment, what is emerging all around us? Another way to think about this as we move through, it's a question that's anchored in the past, that's focused on the future, or that is present forming. We can think about it as something that is being data-driven. We're all familiar with this. Being data-informed, like design thinking, right? Or being data-receptive. And what do I mean by data-receptive? Data-receptive is essentially, you can think about the best athletes in the world. Think about Lionel Messi. He's arguably the best soccer player in the world. He knows everything. He's data-driven. He knows everything about how his own body functions. He knows the playbooks of the other team. He knows the height of the pitch before he goes out onto it. But the second the whistle blows, he's interacting with what's happening right there. And that's the difference and distinction in these kinds of strategies. And so as you're thinking about it, it is also then the difference between thinking and doing and being. When you first learn something in school, there's a lot of thinking about it. When you get to the business of doing, you start your first internship or your first job, there's the practice of doing. But then after 5, 10, 15, 20 years of a career, there is a beingness to you that is much more intuitive. And so as you're thinking about strategy, the same way that when Einstein came into the world, gravity didn't go away, but our understanding of it expanded. These 3 questions can be like the twist of a kaleidoscope. Same central problem, But if you ask it from 3 different lenses, then your strategy and your opportunities begin to expand. And then finally, centering humans and humanity. In the face of all of this change, and you're gonna hear about a lot of technology coming up. As we're moving into this, I'm just curious about our relationship with AI. Is there anybody in the room who is still an observer of AI? I just see, I don't think in this crew, but just, okay, so anyone in this room who would consider themselves a user of AI? You use tools every day or on a more or less frequent basis. Who here would consider themselves a creator of AI? You're building technology, you're programming it in some way, shape, or form. So this is the thing, and especially for an audience in fintech. By our presence or our absence, and by our clients' presence or their absence, we are all creators of the technology. And so having a clear understanding of who is doing the programming, who is doing the utilization, where data sets are coming from, particularly if you're making financial decisions about somebody's life, you want to ensure that you can have access to everybody in that same database, right? So we are all creators by our presence or our absence. And then secondly, under this umbrella, the idea of making things personal. Middle of the pandemic-ish, right? About a year or so in, 6 months in, I was asked by the boards of a handful of companies to come in and help them evaluate and create their not their return to office strategy, but their frontline worker strategy, right? These were companies that had back office corporate and frontline workers. And frontline workers could be retail or fast food or insurance, right? And they would come in and they would talk to me about what the strategy was gonna be and how they were gonna execute it. And they asked me, well, what do you think about this strategy? What pointers or tips can you give us? And I said, well, I have thoughts about this, but let me ask you one critical question. Have you asked the people who are being impacted by the strategy that you've created what their thoughts are or their input is? Only 100% of these boardrooms, all the C-suite had said no, right? These are very smart folks who are plugged into all the things. And so as you're thinking about how you're gonna roll out AI inside of your organizations and then in and through your products and their life cycles and what your touch points are with every one of your consumers, I would invite you to ask, how are they experiencing it? What do they need? Is it tech and efficiency for tech and efficiency's sake, or is it actually helping the human beings who we are trying to impact truly flourish in the world? Centering humans and humanity. So today we moved through 3 big strategies, getting clear about what it is that we're up to, why it's important, so that we can make decisions that are either aligned or not with whatever's going on inside of our organizations. Expanding our options so that we can shift our strategy to meet the frenzy of the moment and the dynamics of change that the market is moving through. And then finally, centering humans and humanity. But all of this was in the broader context of the massive shifts that are happening in the world of the stackable factory. And so as you're getting ready to spend 2 days here together and explore the enormous opportunities, both in terms of market, connection, investment, I'll invite you to remember these concepts that we talked about here today, because you can employ them in your conversations as well as for your businesses as soon as you walk out the door. But even more than that, what I'm going to invite you to do is to remember to anchor into your humanity. So if you can just sit up again for a moment. Just, tap your arms again. Are you still here? Are you alive? So far, so good? Tap your legs. Still so far, so good? Look to your neighbors. Say hello again. Look them in the eye. Oh, more new friends. Good job, everybody. So the future of this moment right now, in which we are experiencing more disruption than ever before, is sitting in the power of each and every one of us to anchor into our humanity and create a future rooted in this now of community and connection. Thank you all very much. Have a great conference.